Hello everyone, and for those of you returning, welcome back. This is part 2 of a 3-part retrospective review of the Dungeons & Dragons Rules Cyclopedia. So, if you haven't checked out part 1, here's a link for you to do so. In this video, I'm going to delve into detail on the official D&D game world, the world of Mystara, or as it was originally known simply as the Known World. However, before I do that, I want to clarify some things from part 1, specifically exactly why there was an alternative Dungeons & Dragons game system to begin with. It all starts back in 1974, when TSR was still in its infancy. Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson, the co-creators of Dungeons & Dragons, did sign an agreement turning the rights of the game over to TSR. One of the terms of this agreement was that if D&D was ever out of print for more than 90 days, then the rights of the game would return to the original authors. Interestingly enough, I actually managed to find a copy of this document online. Now, Gygax had put forth that AD&D was a new game, a different game from Dungeons & Dragons, and therefore TSR did not need to pay Dave Arneson any royalties on AD&D material. But this logic did have a bit of a problem for TSR, because if indeed AD&D was a different game, then original D&D would have to stay in print due to the original agreement. Otherwise, the rights of Dungeons & Dragons would revert back to Arneson and Gygax. So, ultimately, all disputes were settled out of court, and 20 years later, when Wizards of the Coast wanted to publish their own edition of the game simply titled Dungeons & Dragons, Peter Atkinson, the CEO of Wizards of the Coast, approached Arneson, and Arneson relinquished all rights to the game for an undisclosed sum of money. Alright, now on to part 2. For those of you who want to delve further into this fascinating fantasy game world, you might be surprised to know that while Wizards of the Coast has never developed Mystara in any way, the world does have a strong online presence with the website The Vaults of Pandius. In addition, Wizards of the Coast has given the official seal to the Vaults of Pandius website, and you can find that at pandius.com, so be sure to check that out. The outer world of Mystara is divided into 3 major continents: Devania, Skothar, and Brune, with most of the action from the supplements taking place on the eastern side of the continent of Brune, and colloquially referred to as the Known World. It gets its origins from the original Dungeons & Dragons expert set that was released in 1981. There, a black and white map, shown here, of the Known World was given as a sample wilderness, with a page dealing with the various regions, as well as a page detailing the central region, the Grand Duchy of Karameikos. The expert set also included the module, the Isle of Dread. Here, the map was given a bit more detail, and a brief 1 or 2 paragraph description of each of the territories of the map was given. The Grand Duchy of Karameikos, the Emirates of Irlurum, the Principalities of Galantry, the Kingdom of Ariendi, the Northern Reaches, which details the kingdoms of Vestland, Ostland, and the Solgerford Jarldoms, the 5 Shires, which is the homeland of the Halflings, who referred to themselves as the Hin, the Mitharon Guilds, the Broken Lands, more specifically, the Orcs of Thar, the Ethengar Khanates, or the Golden Khan of Ethengar, the Republic of Daracon, and the Atruagan clans, and the Empire of Theatis, which was covered in the Dawn of the Emperor's box set. Also listed, but never seeing a TSR publication, is the Heldonic Freeholds, which was loosely based on the Knights Templar. However, you can find a pretty detailed treatment in Gazetteer form on the Vaults of Pandius website. The first of the Gazetteers published was the Grand Duchy of Karameikos. Generally considered the default starting setting for the Known World, Karameikos is your typical medieval fantasy setting. All of the B modules are considered to have taken place here, and the information in this supplement sets up a rich tapestry whereby an imaginative DM can weave traditional fantasy stories. If you enjoy dungeon exploration, court intrigue and are looking to help tame a relatively unexplored and wild land, Karameikos is a great setting. The Duchy's namesake is Stefan Karameikos, originally from the Empire of Theatis. He traded his vast family holdings to the emperor for complete autonomy and rulership of the conquered but untamed lands of Traladar. Conquered by Theatis 100 years before the time frame of the game, the Traladaran lands were still mainly wild and unsettled. At the time, the empire was cash-strapped due to rapid expansion and its rivalry with the Empire of Alphantia. The lands of the House of Karameikos were rich and already well developed. Thus, the emperor found the deal quite agreeable and agreed to the trade. The Grand Duchy of Karameikos was therefore born. Stefan immediately put out a call to his fellow Theatian nobles to come with him to help develop this rich, wild, and untamed lands that he had recently acquired, and many responded eagerly to the call. What this does, this sets up a nice little dynamic and conflict with the traditional Traladarian nobles of the land and the Theatian upstarts from Theatis. One of the interesting things about the known world in general is its shades of gray storytelling, where the good side isn't always clearly defined. Stefan Karameikos is a prime example, and many of the decisions he makes in his effort to develop and maintain control over his duchy could be considered morally questionable. In Karameikos, you find the Black Eagle Barony. This small barony is run by Ludwig von Hendrix, Stefan Karameikos' evil cousin, who came with him from Theatis. Hendrix is an evil despot of the highest order, and, along with his evil mage Bargle, rules the barony with an iron fist. Hendrix Mage Bargle actually was introduced in a introductory adventure in the Moldvay edition of the basic set. Now, it is important to point out that all the Gazetteers share certain characteristics. Many were divided into two books, a DM's book and a player's book. In addition, two histories were frequently presented. There was the history the player characters knew of the setting, and then there was the actual history for the Dungeon Master. Part of the fun of exploring Mystara is learning the legends of the land as told by the local peoples or by sages, but then exploring the ancient ruins and slowly uncovering the dark, secret truths therein, truths sometimes hidden by the immortals themselves. Another important feature about the world of Mystara is that the gods are frequently former mortals who have followed one of the paragon paths to immortality as described in the master set of the rules. Each Gazetteer does introduce one or frequently several new immortals to the world's pantheon. For example, in Karameikos, the immortal introduced is Halav, the legendary king of the Traladarian people, who ultimately died in battle during a Nolan invasion and ascended to immortality. Another thing that the Gazetteers all shared was a timeline of events. All start at the year 3000 BC or before crowning. The crowning being referred to in the date is the first emperor of Theatis, and the current date for all the Gazetteers is set at 1000 AC or 1000 after crowning. Each new Gazetteer details a particular culture or race, its history, and frequently adds new rules or classes to the existing Dungeons & Dragons rules. For example, the Dwarves of Rockholm supplement introduces a character class to allow for Dwarven clerics. Beginning in Gazetteer number 5, the Elves of Alfheim, a new skill system was introduced. Now the skills therein directly related to skills that were of particular use to elves, but it was stated that other races could make use of the system. Elven skills introduced here were things like tracking and tree walking, singing, and so on. Also, there were several elven clans described in some detail in this supplement, and many skills were related to a particular clan. The skill system described therein was very similar to the advanced Dungeons & Dragons non-weapon proficiency system, and allowed for a bit more detailed character customization. From this point forward, each new Gazetteer would introduce new skills that related to the particular campaign setting that was being covered. For example, the Dwarves of Rockholm introduced skills for dwarves such as caving or gambling. It should be noted that sometimes the same skill worked differently in one supplement, and then in another one, the reader was referred to another Gazetteer for its skill list, and so forth. Thus, after 14 supplements and 2 box sets, the skill system, while comprehensive, was a monster of conflicting skill resolution systems. The Hollow World box set attempted to address this problem to some degree by presenting a comprehensive, unified skill system drawing from all the previous Gazetteers and putting them into one place. In addition to the exhaustive skill list, the number of immortals who were added to the milieu and played an important role in the D&D world also grew extensively during the run of the Gazetteer series. Once again, the Hollow World box set would attempt to address this issue as providing a single place where all the immortals listed and presented thus far were put in order. A sort of mini deities and demigods for the known world was presented in that box set, as well as all their spheres of influence. Now, one of the more intriguing aspects to all of this was that the history of the known world was slowly revealed with each new Gazetteer. Even the DM did not know all the history, and it was well established that this game world was the same campaign world as Dave Arneson's Blackmoor campaign, as each new supplement would basically begin its timeline with 3000 BC, a Blackmoor device explodes, the great rain of fire, which nearly destroys the world and tilts it on its axis. In the Gazetteer Gazetteer, it is revealed all the magic in the known world is in jeopardy due to a mysterious device called the nucleus of the spheres, which is actually a nuclear reactor heavily modified by the immortals themselves and buried 10,000 feet below the great school of magic in Gazetteer City. It is the single most powerful artifact in the world and gives off a special magical power called the Radiance. The secret of the Gazetteer wizards is that the thing that gives Gazetteer wizards their special powers and their whole power structure of Gazetteer nobility is centered on manipulation of the Radiance. The Principalities of Gazetteer goes into great detail on the nucleus of the spheres, the Radiance, its use, and a whole list of special spells for its manipulation are provided. Another effect of this device is that it allows mortals to attain immortality much easier than the normal Paragon path. However, once the immortals discovered this, they intervened and gave it a really nasty side effect, which is secretly known only to the DM, which I'll reveal here. So if you are a player, I'm going to do a little spoiler here for you. You might want to stop the video. I don't know. But anyway, the spoiler here is that each use of the Radiance drains a bit of magic from the prime material plane. Eventually, after several centuries of use, all magic would be drained from the world of Mystara. So that's a pretty horrific side effect. The Gazetteer supplement details a system to measure this drain, who is draining the Radiance, and what the effects are upon the world due to its use. This also sets up a conflict with the immortals themselves, as there are those in favor of this permanent magic drain, and those that are against it. Now, let's skip ahead to Gazetteer number 13, the Shadow Elves. To me, this is possibly the singularly best overall supplement. These underground dwelling elves are nothing like the drow of the advanced Dungeons & Dragons milieu. They are extremely pale with white hair. The priests and priestesses have a purple birthmark over their faces, the mark of Raphael, their patron immortal. And their customs are interesting, and it is all based on the use of the Radiance and special artifact-like little devices called the soul crystals. These soul crystals are actually fragments of the nucleus of the sphere scattered about the land and buried by the great rain of fire 4,000 years before, and whose magical properties will only survive while underground. Raphael tells the Shadow Elves that the crystals are soul crystals, and they contain the souls of future Shadow Elves, and that they should go about their business wherever they find them. The crystals allow for the use of Radiance magic, but without the side effect of draining the prime material plane of its magic, since the crystals are not cursed by the immortals. Thus, searching for these so-called soul crystals becomes an important task in the lives of the Shadow Elves, a task given to them by their immortal patron, Raphael. The priesthood, its traditions, and its secrets are described in great detail, and the secrets of the Radiance are presented to inspire a certain bit of awe and curiosity as one gains levels. If you're a priest or priestess in the service of Raphael, each new level you begin to attain a slow revelation as to the true nature of the soul crystals. It's just fascinating stuff, and it's a fun read, and the way the book is written and presented slowly reveals the mystery to the reader as well. Now, if I was going to list the must-have Gazetteers required to run a real proper Mystara campaign, and since there are 14 Gazetteers and 2 box sets, it could be daunting to try to collect all of these on eBay. So you don't really need them all, and you really only need one particular Gazetteer to begin running that campaign setting. Like, you would really only need the Grand Duchy of Karameikos, and you could immediately start running a campaign there without any problem at all, because there's tons and tons of information given to you to allow for that. However, if you're running the world, certainly there's going to be interaction with the other territories that surround Karameikos, and especially if you're playing a non-human character like a dwarf or an elf or a hin, you might want some background on the particular homeland that you might be from. So that might be handy to have those supplements. So, in order of importance, I would say the Grand Duchy of Karameikos is an absolute must-have, followed by the Principalities of Calantri, the Elves of Alfheim, the Dwarves of Rockholm, the 5 Shires, the Shadow Elves, the Orcs of Thar. Wow, I really should stop for a second and talk about the Orcs of Thar. This is probably the most hilarious game supplement you will read. It goes into great detail on Orcish training, and it is really presented primarily as amusement, but the Orcish armies and their leader are pretty horrific as well. So it goes into some description on the Broken Lands and the threats therein. So if you were looking to find a nice enemy for the player characters where you can bring in some conflict, that's a great supplement to get too. And I would suggest, if you really want to have a good time, sit down and read the Orcs Military Training Manual. Rules are also given so that you could technically run a complete Orcs of Thar campaign playing Orc characters, which, if you read the manuals, the military training manual, and those things, could be very funny and a very amusing campaign. So that's something to look into. The Dawn of the Emperors box set is also quite good. Lots of campaign material there. Great detail goes into the Empire of Theatus as well as the Empire of Alphantia, which goes into the rivalry between the two empires. There's there's wars that have been fought, as well as detail on serving in the military, being a gladiator, and all kinds of interesting things. So that's a lot of fun. I did want to talk real briefly about the Empire of Alphantia, just because it's a very powerful magic-using empire, and it is the chief rival of the Empire of Theatus. They have a lot of interesting magic items, and one of the cool things they have are sky ships, or basically almost like spell jamming type galleons that fly. And there was a series called The Voyage of the Princess Ark, detailed in Dragon magazine for several years, where the crew flew all over the known world, visiting all 3 continents, and a lot of great information is there. This was later all compiled and released in a box set called The Champions of Mystara So you might want to check that out. It's a lot of great information, and you can get some detail on the other two continents and some more information on the continents of Brune in that supplement. I also want to recommend the 4 modules, DA1 through DA4, which were written by Dave Arneson and David J. Ritchie. These modules have the characters going back in time via a special ruin called the Comeback Inn to the time of Blackmoor, before the Blackmoor device exploded and tilted the world on its axis. The adventure actually goes into detail and is based off the original Dungeons & Dragons Blackmoor supplement, The Temple of the Frog. However, everything is updated and rewritten for Dungeons & Dragons. So there's also an exploration of the SS Beagle, which is the spaceship that crash lands near the ancient kingdom of Blackmoor, and all the mayhem that ensues and comes with that. And if you know what the secret is of the Temple of the Frog, then you might have an idea of how they're connected. If not, that's also a little fun discovery. It's also just a real fun module series with secrets revealed in the end that are important to the campaign world. The Hollow World box set is simply awesome. If you enjoy fantasy fiction and classics such as The Lost World by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, Tarzan by Edgar Rice Burroughs, Journey to the Center of the Earth by H.G. Wells, the old classic movie serials and pulp adventures, and of course, any of the Indiana Jones movies, then you'll just love this supplement. Essentially, you learn that the world of Mystara is hollow. And just a little side note here, this supplement is actually the very first time that it was officially referred to in a module. The game world was called Mystara. Up until that point, it had been simply referred to as the known world. Essentially, the Hollow World is a living museum of past cultures. Here, you will find Bronze Age warriors alongside Mayan-like people called the Azkans. You'll also find Egyptian-like people called the Nithians, alongside tribes of elves and dinosaurs. The Hollow World is created by the immortal Ka the Preserver, who wanted to preserve certain tribes and cultures that were on the surface of the world at moments when they would have been wiped out and gone forever. So their cultures are preserved, and there's actually a kind of magical spell that preserves these cultures and keeps them in their current state. Overhead, the sun burns perpetually, seemingly to surface dwellers, fixed at 12 noon, though the sun flares occasionally, and there's a slightly reddish hue, giving everything the look of an almost sunset. Night is unheard of in the lands of the Hollow World, but vast, floating continents hover overhead, circling around the sun, populated with their own peoples and cultures, and these moving land masses orbit at regular intervals, blocking the sun's light and creating a sort of nighttime in certain spots on the lands below. And it also allows inhabitants of the Hollow World to mark the passage of time. So, if you've ever wondered why people love this campaign setting, I would have to say it's because of its variety, attention to detail, and the sense of wonder and adventure that the supplement evokes. I could do 10 videos and never really scratch the surface of everything that is to be explored. There are some uninformed reviews you might find online that call Mystara your typical Tolkien-esque fantasy world. But I think, through these descriptions, that I've demonstrated that this is really far from the truth. Certain parts of it, like Karameikos, sure. But there is certainly a lot more to it than just that. Anyway, that about wraps up my overview of the world of Mystara. There is a lot more to explore, and many wonderful things to discuss that I did not have time to do in this video, but I hope at least I've whet your appetite and piqued your interest to explore it further. And please don't forget to check out the Vaults of Pandia's website for more information. My next video will conclude this series with a review of one of the all-time great Dungeons & Dragons releases, the D&D Rules Cyclopedia. I'm also going to do a little review here in the next day or so of the Android application, the MoFlow Initiative Tracker. Over the next several weeks, I will certainly continue my retro review series, as well as start a new one called D&D Dialectic, where I will present my thoughts on certain topics such as the alignment system and D&D cosmology, and then we can begin some discussions on that topic in the comments section. It should be a lot of fun. Next month, the new Monster Manual comes out, and I will be sure to get my review on that out as soon as I can, so please check back. Please feel free to subscribe, leave comments below if you like this video, and I will definitely be making more like this one. Until then, as always, my friends, may your D20 roll true, and game on.